Does anyone have any information on whether any local water districts have imposed a state of emergency on themselves this year?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. Is that the first question we should ask anyone who stands up and said the world's coming to an end and I'm running short of water? I mean, I'm just asking that as a planning tool.
I guess the question would be, I'm not sure what would be accomplished. In many ways, we've been in a 2-decade state of emergency,
because
so I don't know what extraordinary powers.
Jason, if everybody, I believe, has all the collective testimony acknowledges that essentially the water supply is not unlimited, it is getting tighter, the weather patterns are more erratic, the demands continue, the supply doesn't grow, and you can get through some years and hopefully a number of years, but there's a point in time where you can't satisfy everybody all the time everywhere. My political experience is the hardest thing to do is to ask water users to reduce their use. That's, except maybe pay more. Those two are the two things that seem the most difficult to do politically because they're unpopular. But are those not the two things that have the most immediate impact on water use in dry conditions?
Well, in all conditions. Certainly, I mean, if you look at I think Metropolitan Water District talks about how they, with the same amount of water, are serving a heck of a lot more people. In agriculture, on the whole in the state, we're producing about twice the food and fiber we did with the same amount of water we had 20 years ago. So there's a tremendous amount of efficiencies there. There is land taken out of production every year in our district permanently. We've taken 100,000 acres of it out, and it's the fallowing is a shock absorber. So we do see that, and demand will we have demands we cannot meet every year, except in the most extreme conditions. And but what we're talking about today is something that is let's hope we do a whole lot of work and we have high flows on the San Joaquin and we have flood conditions, and we can say that we learned some lessons. But it's kind of like one problem we have with that we don't learn from is like in our water transfer world, where every year we start working on water transfers and we get done and then we start all over the next year. We don't have the permanent kind of institutions that will allow for efficiency. We don't have the kind of permanent integration between the CVP and the SWP and place of use and joint point of diversion that are regulatory limitations that would greatly increase the productivity of both projects. We need to, in a sense, take advantage of the crisis that's in front of us to push the institutional, legal, and statutory changes and administrative changes that can increase our supplies and service on into the future, not just in a crisis.
Mr. Fiorini.
This has been a good discussion, and I appreciate hearing from different regions of the state about how you're managing this current crisis that could get worse. There's no question about it. Our responsibility here is to implement projects and actions and help coordinate the activities of many agencies to meet the co-equal goals. Water supply reliability for California is one of those co-equal goals. And what I'd like to do is just go down the line and ask each one of you to name one thing that could be implemented in the next 5 years that would lead to improving water supply reliability in California, similar to what the kinds of things that Jason just talked about. Gary, what's the number one thing that could be done in 5 years? Okay. Next.
This is a problem that many politicians face. They want a big, bold answer to a big problem, and they want it to be non-controversial so everybody can support it and get it done. Those are really, really hard to find. I would say that probably the most significant, there's a lot, as I said, we've got this long list of little things, but probably the biggest thing that could happen that would improve reliability would be the what I just talked about, more for the CVP and the SWP, greater project integration. We have this balance that needs to be struck between the CVP being long on storage and the SWP short on storage relatively, and the SWP having tremendously much more conveyance capacity compared to the CVP. If you can put those two projects together, there could be some operating efficiencies there. The other things that we need to work on are that chart you saw, Mr. Chairman. Those were the layers I was talking about, restriction upon restriction upon restriction, and getting into those and understanding what is the significance of 1,250 net reverse flow limitation on old and middle rivers when we have a 40,000 CFS tidal flux in those same channels, and what happens if we go to 5,000? What does that do for water supply, and what does it do for fisheries? Those are the kind of conversations that's where the cheapest, quickest, best water will be, and it obviously can't be obtained at the expense of the fisheries, but I think we don't know. Well, we've got a lot of evidence that says we could operate in a different way and not harm the fisheries, but the regulators are in charge.
Okay. Cindy?
For our agency, we're a major public agency with a responsibility to provide long-term, reliable, clean, safe water. So I think we would be looking for a long-term solution to the Delta, kind of along the lines of what Gary was talking about. It needs to be a comprehensive solution. Right now, BDCP is the only thing out there that approaches a comprehensive solution that can improve the ecosystem and improve water supply reliability. We haven't taken a position yet on BDCP, but we're hopeful that could be a solution that will help. And so I'd say that would be a major achievement if we can get that plan pulled together. And then another thing is just streamlining water transfers, making sure that we can get the water when we need it in those really dry years.
Multiple year transfers or annual transfers?
I'd say both.
Okay, thanks.
I'll just pick up again. I think a recognition of the importance and the value of a surface storage increment during these critical periods, and that includes existing storage, opportunities to kind of reoperate that storage more effectively, and then, of course, a serious evaluation of some new storage opportunities, such as a site's reservoir.
I'll second that, but for my one, the project that I have my eye on, which is really a regional project, but for the Bay Area I think it can make a big difference, is we're looking at the possibility of constructing a pipeline from our facility at our transfer pump station to the South Bay Aqueduct at Bethany Reservoir. I know those are just names that people maybe don't know, but what this basically does is it interties East Bay Mud to CCWD to San Francisco to the whole Bay Area. And we've looked at regional interties before, and this is one that, regardless of what happens with Delta conveyance or storage or anything else, so now and into the future, we think it's a no-regrets conveyance improvement project.
Thank you all for those answers. It'll give us something to work on.
Okay, other questions? Don.
If I could, and certainly at the risk of putting Gary a little bit on the spot, but just I appreciate the answers and certainly the frankness, and you were very quick to answer and understand certainly, the department's work on it. But I guess I'm curious because certainly to David's point, but even to the rest of the panelists, when the reference to BDCP and what it certainly encompasses, but I think part of certainly the conversation has been talked about in the panel about operational aspects, about storage, about conservation, recycling, but you were very quick that BDCP was next 5 years, that was the answer. But I think it ignores some of the other things here, and again, you've responded to Randy's question. So I guess, so I asked you earlier about storage, and you kind of gave me the vanilla answer, and I guess I'm kind of curious, maybe from the department, again, you have a representative department, I understand that, Gary, but I'm curious, could you weigh in a little more about storage or conservation recycling? You did respond earlier when I asked the question, well, it was kind of a suite of things and it was comprehensive, but then, in response to Randy's question, you were quick to answer that was, the key piece, but then that kind of tends to ignore some of the things the other panelists weighed in on. And so I guess I'm curious about departmentally, you talked about water plan, you referenced that, this bigger thing, but so maybe how BDCP fits in that realm would be useful for answering at least a question in my mind a little better to what Randy asked you.
Okay. Well, I want to be clear. When I answered the question, you asked what's number one, and so I was saying I really feel that's number one. But the main message has been the portfolio is what we're saying. I mean, so I can't stress that enough. So when I actually threw the slide up early in my presentation about the interaction of IWM activities, absolutely a 360 view and integrated water management across the state is the only way we're going to work. There is no magic management action. If I was to go on, it isn't going to be BDCP and that's going to take care of water management in the state of California. Absolutely not. So I'll be very clear about that. What we're doing at the regional IWM level with the conservation of things I heard the colleagues here describing are absolutely necessary. The aspects of storage and how we deal with that and put it in the system and absolutely a part of the mix, both groundwater and surface. So it goes well with the transfers. All these tools are required in the toolkit. I think which is at state level what I see is that essentially what we can do with just this suite. Or we can just do it with this part. And that's not the case. We're going to need every tool in the toolkit.
Okay. I appreciate the clarification. That did help. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for talking to us. We appreciate it. And if any of you have copies of your slideshows or any printed material, Jason, for example, if that list of 50 items is available, we'd love to receive that so we can review them and put it on the website too, if you would. Thank you very much. All right, members, it is 12:25. My recommendation is we take an hour break. We start at 1:25. We have one more panel discussion. We have the delegation from the Netherlands that'll do a short drop by during that time period. Okay? Meeting is in recess until 1:25.